Hey everybody, this is Safi and Marco Dish Out on Movies, the only movie review show on YouTube to review movies in terms of food. And it's just Marco here today to review Mindhunter Season 2. And now, I'd like to reiterate, number one, I'm not a big fan of the show. And number two, I talked about this a lot in the first episode. I didn't want a Killing Kennedy style show. And what I mean by that is something that's sort of like, you know, when you watch these Kennedy specials where they act like, oh, this is the only version you can believe is the official version, where it's basically like propaganda, it's not true, and they leave out all this evidence that just, goes against their claims. And it's not like really outlandish evidence. It's like really, really good evidence. And, well, this season 2 was very Killing Kennedy stylish. And go figure, they didn't talk to the Atlanta child murder victim families. And they didn't really do any research on it either. I mean, it feels like they just read the Wikipedia page on the Atlanta murders. And, it's really insulting, and because this show is very draining to watch, especially when you're dealing with this subject matter. It was very draining to go through each episode and then just like try to get to the next episode and get over it. And it's even worse when they're not telling the truth, when they're exaggerating certain things, when they're straight up lying about certain things and leaving all of this evidence out, and except for this little bit of evidence. I like that, and that's a part of the finale, which I gave a very good grade, by the way. But this whole season is just riddled with inaccuracy. There's lots of subplots that either go nowhere or they end up sort of like really predictably and stupidly. And then there's some weird things with the openings too. The only opening that was different that I liked was the one where they did the fake out, where they had that guy in the car. Spoiler alert, they have a guy in the car asking this kid to get in the car and make some money, and then the episode reveals it was fake. He was doing that on purpose to tell the kid and warn him about what could happen. And so I love that. That was a fantastically done moment. I don't know if fantastically is a word though, so whatever. But this season, it started off with a bang. I really thought I was going to love this season from the first episode. The first episode, I was so excited. It was fantastic. They introduced all these new characters. Holden, he's not this like really, really selfish and sort of jerk. This guy who just thinks he knows everything. He's a little bit more, he's different. He's changed, and I love the fact that he's changed. And he has this sort of, quote, threat where he could have a panic attack at any moment. And that was such a fantastic idea. I don't know, this character isn't real, but he's based on a real person. I don't know what is real and what's not real from his side of things in terms of that kind of stuff. But I do know about the serial killers. And then in the first episode, you have a great BTK scene. In the beginning, you have just all this great stuff. You have a new boss who replaces that crappy old one who kept on not letting them do things and yelling at them and just acting like a grumpy old guy. And he has the best scene in the whole episode where he reveals something and it gives him a panic attack. And it's the best scene of the episode, and I was like, oh my god, is this season gonna be like really good all the way through? And then immediately, unsurprisingly, by the way, because this happened with the first season too in the kind of opposite way. Episode 1 was an F, episode 2 was an A-, for this show, episode 1 was an A+, episode 2 was an F. In episode 2, we get Son of Sam, played by Levon from Californication Season 7. And now, I don't know if you guys know this, but in Californication Season 7, there's this character named Levon, and he's a very weird and annoying character. He's the worst new character they introduce. He's basically this man-child, and the whole point is that he's a man-child because he never had a father, and so, like, the whole season, like, David Duchovny has to, raise him and sort of help him out, and, like, really weird stuff. And he's in this show, and he does the exact same type of job you'd expect from Levon from Californication Season 7. He's not really, he kind of sounds like Son of Sam, but kind of not. He's kind of just, it's like they took some random Jewish guy, but Son of Sam's Jewish, by the way, that's why I'm saying that. And they took some random Jewish guy, and they just taped a picture of Son of Sam on his face. That's what it looks like. Or maybe put a mask on. And that's what it reminds me of, because he really did an abysmal job. And the whole interview is just inaccurate, the way that they act like he's this sort of insane person who just faked the dog thing, so because he knew that it was wrong, and he just wanted that because he was the only killer. As we all know, Son of Sam, he's not the Son of Sam, but he is revealed that that he was with this cult called the Process Church, and their mission was to spread chaos throughout New York City. And he was one of the people who killed people, but there were all these other people who killed the other people, and they videotaped them, and they sold them to people like Robert Mapplethorpe, and all sorts of crazy stuff. And there's tons of evidence to back that up, and tons of real police officers who investigated it and are still talking about it. And this show, for some reason, it does that little killing Kennedy thing, because it won't serve their narrative, so they'll only show what they want you to know. So, yes, he does admit that he faked the dog thing, but for a purpose that's not true to real life. And then they act like the whole demon thing is a joke. Well, I will tell you, he has admitted in interviews that he felt like he had a demon inside of him because he just felt so evil at the time. And I don't know how to describe it. It's just he got it out of him, I guess. Not that he had a real demon, but, well, enough about Son of Sam. Just research that on your own. But the whole point of talking about that so much is that it's the whole episode. And it's really a disappointment. And the fact that they're saying BTK is a Son of Sam ripoff is just absurd, to say the least. And I'm not going to get into that. And so, another thing I'd like to talk about is the lesbian subplot. One thing this season is that it doesn't have as many feminism agendas in it. There's a lot of other agendas in it, like homophobia agendas and racist agendas, stuff like that in this season, but not much feminism. And the lesbian character Wendy, the only reason why I'm mentioning lesbian is because that's really all there is to her. I mean, her character basically listens to tapes, says stuff, and then interviews someone once, and that's it, And in the first episode, she's looking at this other woman at the bar, and I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, I'm not bothered by this. This is subtle and nice. If I was out in a bar, which I don't like bars, if I was out at a bar and I saw a pretty girl, I would look at her a couple of times. And so, like, I'm okay with that. But then, in the second episode, she comes back. They just couldn't resist, could they? She has to come back, and she goes up to the bar, and magically, when she's at the bar, she hears the bartender say, "I play for the other team." And then she walks away like, "Oh yeah, I've got to go strategize now." I'm serious. That's what she looked like. And she walks away, and it's like, "Okay, I'm leaving." and and they end up having a relationship, which I skip over and I fast forward through, by the way, because it's useless, and it ends up the same way as the relationship in the last season did. So, very goofy. And so basically, they traded a straight romantic subplot for a lesbian romantic subplot. And not that I mind that, it's just that they're both useless. They add nothing to the story. Nothing. And I don't care about these people to begin with. The only one I care about really is the partner. And he has a subplot which is so bad that it just... And let's get to that subplot now. The partner's kid is involved in something, and the whole season he's spending like trying to find out from his son what happened. His son won't talk and everything. It's really complicated. The reason why it bothers me is because, number one, too many episodes have the subplot in it so much. I mean, so much of these episodes is spent with that subplot. Number two, not the fact that I mind that, but number two, they never resolve it. In fact, this show only has 10 episodes. This season is about 29 or more children who were involved in a sex trafficking organization and who were brutally murdered and just dumped around the Atlanta and Georgia. And they only do 9 episodes instead of 10 episodes. Very, very strange. Very, very strange. And so that subplot sucks. And then we get to the main subplot with Atlanta. Now, we all know that someone was sent to prison for Atlanta, and he was only convicted for 2 out of the 29 murders. And rightfully so, because he's like a patsy. He's straight up like a patsy for this organization that he was a part of, stated by multiple people in Atlanta. And they would know this if they would just talk to people and find out the truth. Because there was this other guy, or this woman, it was a guy. Yeah, it was a guy. And he went to this laundromat where one of the victims, where he actually saw him getting sexually assaulted and then murdered by this other guy that they didn't even care to look into. And the reason why they didn't is because they said that eyewitness was mentally retarded. And so basically they just made up an excuse to not believe him. And they don't even mention this in the show. He was right there seeing him with the yellow rope, seeing him get strangled and sexually assaulted. I mean, what the hell? And so that's what you have there. So much of the season is spent talking about the KKK, talking about that whole race crap. How, oh, it couldn't be a black guy who did all this stuff. And that was a little monotonous. And then Charles Manson. The reason why, truthfully, the reason why I watched the season in the first place is because the guy who played him in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood plays him in this season. I wanted to watch the season just to see his performance. And boy, did he do a terrible job without Quentin Tarantino's direction. Boy. It's basically, it turns into a shouting contest, and I've basically listened to all of Charles Manson's interviews, and he's doing this terrible impression, and there are these quotes, like, there's one where it's like, you don't know where your children are. And Charles does it in real life in this really like haunting type of way, and then and they're my children, And then this guy, he's like, you don't know where your children are, they're my children. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, this very, very bad impression of this infamous person. And that whole, you can add to that, the killing Kennedy nonsense. But at least they talked about the list. There was a list of other houses they were supposed to hit. And that's a very important detail to remember when you're looking into the Manson case, by the way. And so the Atlanta thing, it takes up the majority of the season. The season feels more like a procedural than the first season. I mean, the whole season basically is a procedural, and a bad one at that. You have that stupid ass filter, that color filter, make everything yellow, make everything look brown. That's what they do in the show. And the one thing though is that they kind of redeemed themselves in the last episode. The last episode was phenomenal to me. And it's because of the guy who they got to play Wayne Williams. He did a fantastic job. He was chilling. He was very creepy to watch. And he's a patsy too, and he's creepy because he's involved with these other people and because he did some of the stuff himself. And he was just really, wow, did he give a great performance. He is on par, if not even better than the guy who plays Ed Kemper. And the whole episode is extremely suspenseful. There's one particular moment where he buys them, well, I don't want to give it away, but he does something, it's like this really comedic, but really, like, creepy moment, and, like, just really a great episode. And also, it hammers in the fact that they really didn't solve the case at all. They really just solved, like, a little tiny portion of it, and then said, oh, yay, we solved it! We're such good FBI agents, and we're this great agency that solves everything. And really, they didn't. And you can feel that, this sort of dissatisfying feeling. The reason why I'm not satisfied with that aspect is because they really only give just a tiny bit of stuff, a tiny bit of information about other possibilities. They basically talk about there were these child pornography Polaroids found, and there were all these black kids in photos, and then the photos with the black kids went missing when they were taken in by police. And so basically, one of the police threw out all the photos. And there was other police stuff too. This police guy, he didn't confiscate rope that could have been used in a murder out of the suspect's car. And so only two little tiny examples, but definitely showing police corruption. And not surprising in Atlanta, by the way. It's not some, oh, this is a big conspiracy nut talking about conspiracy theories. No, this is very believable. It's Atlanta. So, the reason why it's so dissatisfying in general is because the partner's kid storyline is not resolved. I would have said the ending was good if that was solved. Just one. I mean, you don't have to solve everything. Just you have those two plots, they're running back to back, and not one of them is solved. So there's no resolution, it feels like. And so it feels like at that moment, the slow guy woke up and he was like, oh, hey, what are you doing? You can't read this. You don't know how to read. I have to read that to you. Give me that. And he took it away. He took it away out of your hands and slapped you in the face with it because he's so angry that you're trying to figure it out for yourself. And so that's what this season felt like. Overall, this season is just slightly worse than the first season. There's a lot of filler. There's a lot of shenanigans. There's not a lot of attention where there should be attention in this very, very important and ongoing Atlanta case, by the way. The very, very disappointing season for such important subject matter. And so I would rate this season. Things got rubberier. Things got rubberier from here. I would rate this a brisket sandwich with a soggy bun, and then the brisket is burnt. The brisket is all burnt and fatty, and you can't eat any of it, and there's no sauce. Then there's sauce on the side, but it's spilled all over the bag, and you can't use the sauce unless you rub the bag up against the sandwich. And then you have these fries, and these are the subplots. These fries, and the fries are soggy, and they're not cooked all the way, and they're just, they're all rubbery and soft and wet. And then you have these green beans that have a bunch of stems inside them that stab into your gums and make you sick, and there's no resolution for the healing of your gums from the wounds of the stems. And just very gross meal, just very, very disappointing meal. I don't think I'll watch the third season, to be honest. I think that I will skim through the episodes and watch the good-looking parts, and then skip the rest, because, I mean, if I had done that with the first season, just watch all the good parts, I would have liked it a lot more. And unfortunately, great moments does not equal a great show. The reason why Being Human is my favorite show of all time is because it's able to maintain a consistent level of suspense and interest throughout each episode with the story that matters to these characters. In this show, there is no story anymore. The first season had more of a narrative than this season, and the first season was bad to begin with. So you have two bad seasons. I don't know how the third season's going to be like. Maybe the next season will only be 8 episodes. Because let me tell you, if it was 10 episodes, they would have had to go and interview those families and find out that they're severely mistaken. Because even the real-life profiler admits that Wayne Williams was not the only killer. And so you know crap is bad when the real-life profile your propaganda show is based on admits that there was more than one guy. So, yeah, this episode was basically like a big conspiracy episode, and I won't be doing a lot of that, but I felt it was necessary for this show. It missed the mark so much, and the new boss, he was a big disappointment too, and the fact that Holden, he didn't have to ever deal with any threat of having a panic attack. They talked about it the whole season, like, oh, you don't want him to be alone, he'll have a panic attack. And then the whole season, there's no threat of him having one at all, except for that one moment in episode 1. Episode 1 really set the bar high, and then the rest of the season, and then you add on to the fact, Wendy, she doesn't do anything this whole season, and then you add on to the fact that effer Greg, the traitor who gave away the tape unnecessarily, he's useless in this season too, but he is involved in one of the funniest scenes. And so that's all I want to say about the season. I just want to forget, like a bad dream. I just want to forget about this stupid show. Goodbye, everybody.